Okay, everyone, I'm here with my friend Jerry Brainum, and I talk about your newsletter all the time, appliedmetabolics.com. It's the best information out there on fitness, supplements, training, you name it. You put a lot of work into that, and it's well worth the subscription fee, worth way beyond that. And there was an article I read recently where you talked about exercise and how you've had to just modify exercise as you've gotten older. Because those of us that are fitness enthusiasts like us, we want to do this for the rest of our lives.
Right.
I started working out as a teenager, just like you, and then you're a competitive bodybuilder in your 20s, I believe, and in your 60s now, you're still working out regularly. I'm 48, I'm still working out regularly. And I think what a lot of people want to know is, how do you modify training as you get older? What are some of the important parameters to pay attention to just get the most out of it and to avoid injuries? Because that's a big thing too. I talked to a lot of guys over 40 especially, and they're already pretty beat up. So they're going, every time I work out, I just injure this, I hurt my knee, or I blow up my back. And then they just resolve to going, I guess I'm just not going to be able to do this anymore. And then you just become sedentary. Yeah. So I think a better strategy is, how do we modify things?
Right.
To get the most out of training.
Well, there's one question before I get into that. One question that I've gotten a lot, maybe you have too, is a lot of guys, let's say, worked out years ago, and they got married, had a bunch of kids and work problems. They didn't have time to train, or well, I don't like to say they didn't have time to train, because I don't really believe that. I even wrote an article that you might have seen about, how you can always find, basically I gave ideas how no matter how busy you are, there's always a way to find time to train. But let's give the benefit of the doubt. The point is, they stop training. And they say to me something like, well, I haven't trained in 20 years. If I go back, am I going to get messed up, or will I be able to gain muscle back and lose all this fat I built up? Right. And the answer is yes. And I couldn't have given such a positive answer years ago, but they've done some research over especially at Tufts University, where they've had people that are like 90 years old with walkers. Some of these people never worked out. I mean, they were so weak they couldn't lift a 2-pound dumbbell. They put on a very light weight training program, very gradual, and like the men who had walkers, or the women, they got rid of the walkers. They became completely mobile, and some of them, this is incredible, actually built some. Not a lot of. I made a joke about it in my newsletter. I said none of them were ever a threat to the current Mr. Olympia as far as muscle mass, but they gained strength. Not a lot of muscle size, because there's a physiological thing that happens with something called satellite cells. These are muscle stem cells. Unfortunately, as you get older, they don't become as activated, and they're kind of needed to build for muscle hypertrophy growth. And there's also the motor neuron effect. It's a lot of physiological reasons. But the point is, after a certain age, it's very hard to build huge muscles like a bodybuilding competitor. But what you can do is build a surprising amount of strength. And when you're older, you have to have a combination. I'm not saying muscle's not important. It's very important. As a matter of fact, the latest studies show that how much lean mass muscle you have in the body has a direct relationship with mortality. In other words, the less muscle you have, the greater your chance of mortality. From any cause, cancer, cardiovascular disease. But the great thing about the resistance training as you get older is that strength effect, because having that strength, that allows you to do all these things. Like if you're an older person, you want to play with your grandkids, you want to be mobile, you want to do whatever. Having that strength gives you a much greater, what's it called? There's a certain expression, love of life. I can't remember the exact thing. Yeah, I can't remember the expression, but it allows you to enjoy life better, But getting back to your question.
Well, I mean, think about it. If you're someone that's really immobile, because I have a very irrational fear of aging, and what I say by that is, when I see really old people, I go, you know what? I'm just not going to buy tickets to that show. It's just not going to happen to me. That's what I look at it. I go, no, it's not going to happen to me. I'm going to be like this forever. Because and it's not so much, it's not the age, it's the fact that when you see a guy who's all hunched over, and I mean, my wife and I were at our favorite Indian restaurant here in Vegas, Mint Bistro, and there was a couple in front of us, an older couple sitting at the booth in front of us. And this is a buffet. So every time this guy wanted to go to the buffet, his wife had to basically lunge him out of the chair. He couldn't get up out of the chair on his own volition. Yeah. Like, man, that is depressing for me. I go, that's, I go,
Yeah.
could you imagine? Because as a man, you want to be strong and virile and in charge.
Right.
You, like a certain level of, there's so much confidence that comes when you have a certain level of physical fitness. You build up a little bit of strength, you get respect automatically too, you know, if you have a certain physique as well. And I can't imagine not having that. When I see someone like that, it really depresses me.
Yeah. The expression I was trying to remember was quality of life. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
But I can tell you a quick funny story that kind of relates to what you're saying. You of course know who Bruce Lee was, the famous martial artist. You know, Bruce Lee. He was sitting at a outdoor restaurant in Paris being interviewed one day, and as he was being interviewed, this old man started to cross the street, and he was all bent over, messed up. You know, he could barely walk, had to take little steps. Bruce Lee just watched him. You know, they both just looked at the guy walk across the street, and then Bruce Lee turned to the interviewer and he said, "I would rather be dead than wind up like that guy." He says, I will never let that happen." Of course, he died about 2 years later, but he didn't know that was going to happen.
Right.
But the point is, you know, I understood what he meant. I mean, to be vigorous and strong, and then wind up where you know you're literally helpless is a sobering thought. It's a horrible thought. And the good news is that it can actually be largely avoided. I I believe so strongly in the health benefits of resistance exercise like weight training that I think this is a bold statement. I think anyone who doesn't engage, male or female, if you don't engage in resistance training, you're crazy because you're doomed. When you get older, you're going to be messed up. And people don't realize 90% of the people in nursing homes are there not because of dementia or mental reasons, because they're so frail that they can't even take care of themselves. They can't dress themselves. They literally can't even feed themselves sometimes. They're so weak. That's, you know, I mean, that's your future if you don't do something now, you know, or do something to activate your muscles to maintain your strength. The body is a machine. Any doctor, any physiologist will tell you the body is a machine. What happens if you park your car somewhere, you never start it up, you know, you don't do anything, it's going to rust, it's not going to work. The human body is the same thing. From head to toe, it's use it or lose it.
Yes.
So this is why my point being that it's actually more important. I mean, like you said, I was involved in bodybuilding and the contests and all this and that, but you know, a lot of people that I worked out with or saw over the years, some of them were bodybuilding champions. After their competition days were over, they would just quit working out completely.
Right.
That to me is insane. Now, look, you don't look. Nobody expects Mr. Olympia to look like, you know, like he did the day he won the title. I mean, you can't do that. That's extraordinary situation. In other words, you could slim down, and you know you don't have to be that big. But to quit working out as you get older, that when you're older, that's when you need working out more than any other time in your life. See, and this relates to what we're talking about. See, when you're a kid, when you're younger, you could do things that you can get away with that's not going to mess you up. For example, when I was, let's say, in my 20s, I did certain exercises that if I tried to do them today, I'd be in the hospital. Like I was doing an exercise called press behind the neck.
Right.
And I worked up to where I was actually using 315 pounds.
Wow.
What I didn't know was putting your arms in this position, like slightly behind, you know, that it impinges the shoulders. And I was grinding away my shoulder joint for years doing that. And then I'd finish off with an exercise called upright rows with my hands close together. I still see people doing this exercise. Horrible shoulder impingement. Those people are going to pay a price for that. But as a kid, I didn't feel nothing. I had no pain, no injuries, not a thing. You can't do that when you get older. You have to make modifications. See, so in other words, as you get older, you can lift heavy weights. When you're younger, you can get away with it. If you're stupid and use too much weight or bad form, you're still going to get injured because you're human. But in other words, you can get away with a lot of things. You could train with greater frequency. And I'm not even talking about people on drugs like steroid. You have greater recovery capacity. Your connective tissues are more fluid and let's say more amenable to more frequent and harder training. These things change over the years. No matter who you are, no matter how great your physique was, you have to make modifications in training. And usually that calls for more moderate weights, less frequency, and also, you know, a lot of people, I was talking to a bodybuilding champion. He was telling me he still uses the same. This guy's in his 70s, and he says he uses the same weights he did when he was in his 20s. And I didn't want to. He's kind of a friend of mine. I didn't want to argue with him. I remember thinking he's out of his mind. He's going to rip something and not going to be able to train for a year if he keeps doing that. You can't do it. You can't do it. I mean, and the thing is, luckily for men that get older who do want to build a little muscle, recent research in the past couple of years have shown there are ways that as the cliche says, have your cake and eat it too. For example, if you want to develop some muscle size and you're, let's say, over 50, but you don't want to take the chance of lifting heavy weights, what the research shows is you can use lighter weights. I mean, I'm talking really lighter weights, like a little bit more than warm-up weights. I'm talking 30 to 40% of 1 rep max, and you do like 25 to 30 reps. But the key is you have to experiment and use weights that each set goes to at least near failure. If not necessarily complete muscle failure, but close to it where you couldn't do really one more rep. You know what I mean? If you do that, what the studies have shown, the effect on the muscles as far as muscle hypertrophy or growth is the same as if you use 90% of 1 rep, which is very heavy weight. So, and the good news is because this is so much lighter, unless, again, you do something stupid, use really weird joint angles or something, chances of injury are almost nil. You're not going to hurt yourself. I remember talking to this famous bodybuilder named Albert Beckles. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I remember him, yeah.
Albert Beckles had the reputation of being much older than the other bodybuilders. He was allegedly competing against 25-year-old bodybuilders in the professional division when he was 55 years old, and he was beating them. And he looked great. I mean, and I interviewed him once. I said, Albert, I remember what I asked him. I said, Albert, I mean, you've been training for many, many years. What injuries do you have? He said, I don't have any injuries. Because at the time, I myself had, shoulder problems and this and that. I said, wait, you've been training 40 years or something and you don't have any injuries? How's that possible? He says, I modified my training. He says, I actually started out as an Olympic weightlifter, lifting very heavy weights. I trained heavy all the way into my 30s, maybe 35. As soon as I got to be about 40, he says, I switched my training to using moderate weights, not very heavy weights, moderate weights. He says, I use good form. He says, I don't throw the weights around. And as a consequence, I have no injuries at all, zero. Tony Pearson, another champion bodybuilder, he recently told me the same thing. I asked him the same question. What injuries do you have? None. He said the same thing. He modified his training where he's using like moderate. Now, the term moderate weights is kind of like ambiguous because what's moderate to you might be heavy to me or vice versa. What I say by moderate would be a weight that you could control and use comfortably for a rep weight range of, let's say, 8 to 15 reps. Right. That would be a moderate weight. And it's going to vary with each individual. You have to experiment to find out. But if you do that in good form, you could actually, build some muscle, maintain muscle, and do that stuff. But like I say, you can't train the same way. Well, let me put it this way, just to switch a little bit. I was injury free. I felt nothing, no pain in my body until I was 55 years old. That was the turning point. When I turned 55, I started to get aches and pains, and I noticed I couldn't do the volume. If I tried to do the same training volume, nothing would happen. I would actually almost lose muscle. Yeah. I realized I had to modify my training. So what I did is I cut the volume almost in half. I cut it down to nothing. I mean, the least volume training I ever did was when I was, I guess I was about 20, 21 years old. At the time, high intensity was coming into vogue, high intensity training. You remember like Arthur Jones and the Nautilus. Yeah. Basically, they were having you do 1 to 2 sets per exercise, very heavy, as heavy as you can, to failure, to complete muscular failure. And I was young, so I got up to using extremely heavy weights. I got away from it, but the volume, though, you were using heavy weight, but the volume was crazy. The workouts, I used to train my whole body in 25 minutes. Yeah. I mean, I only do 1 to 2 sets, and I train 3 times a week, whole body workouts. But I as I said, I couldn't do that today because using the type of weights I did back then, I'd be in the hospital after 1 set. I just, you have to, I could, like today, what they found, the latest scientific studies show that there's two ways to gain muscle, get muscle hypertrophy or growth. You could use, you have your choice. If you're younger, you can still lift heavy weights, maybe 6, 8 reps, whatever, and that will activate the type 2 fast twitch fibers that are most amenable to muscular hypertrophy, right? Hypertrophy. I always have trouble with that word, hypertrophy. Or your other choice is to use the system I said earlier, lighter weights, go to about maybe 25 to 30 reps. In that case, you're going to have to go to either near muscular failure or muscular failure. The choice is yours. You don't have to go to muscular failure, though. What they found, if you go to the point where right before muscle failure, right, in other words, where you feel like you couldn't do another rep if your life depended on it, you get the same gains as if you went to full muscular failure. And you get the benefit. When you do go to muscular failure, there's always an outside chance of getting an injury because it's just very intense sooner or later. As a matter of fact, when I did that high-intensity system years ago, Arnold Schwarzenegger, it was the original Gold's Gym. Arnold Schwarzenegger watched me do it one day. I knew Arnold. And he came up to me. He says, Jerry, he says, you're not going to be able to last on this type of training because he noticed I was going to failure with these heavy weights. I said, why? Arnold, I'm making gains like I've never made. People think I'm on steroids. I'm taking nothing. He says, you can't do it. He says, even if your muscles can take it, your mind won't. You can't go into the gym and push like that.
Right.
Year after, you can't do it. You will burn out. And I respected Arnold and I liked him, but I said to myself, I didn't want to argue. I said, okay, Arnold, thanks for the advice. But I said to myself, he's full of crap. I'm making a lot of gains. I'm going to keep doing it. Yeah. I have to admit, the truth is Arnold turned out to be right. 2 months later, I started to dread going in the gym because I was only, again, 21 years old, but I just couldn't stand the thought of having to train to failure. I was literally burned out on a 25-minute, 3 times a week workout. I just couldn't take it. It was just too much.
Right.
But in other words, I still think it has its place. If you want to lift heavy and go to failure, it's good if you use it as part of what they call a periodization system, where you might do it for 3 months and then go back to more moderate training. That's good if you're younger. But again, I don't recommend that to guys over 40. Guys over 40, the best thing to do is again, you have 2 choices. Either use moderate weights like Beckles and these other guys did, 8 to 12 reps in good form, full movements, none of this crap I see. I saw a guy in the gym doing tricep extensions, an older guy. He was going, I'm not exaggerating. Take a look at it. He was going like this. This is what he was doing. I almost took out my camera. I was going to film him. I took all my willpower not to walk up to him and say,
hey, it's always an older guy who's training like that.
Yeah, it's always, that's a waste of time. You might as well stay home. That's not going to do a damn thing for you, And also, I know I've said this before. We've talked about this. If you're an older guy in the gym, don't do what some of these younger people do and take out the cell phone and start playing with the cell phone for 25 minutes on Facebook and Instagram in between each set, because there's a good reason for it. Not only do you destroy the muscle-mind connection, which is true, you have to have, and this is true, Meg, you have to have your mind in your muscles, literally. You have to be thinking to fully contract the muscles. You might not realize it, but that's what's going on. You have to fully concentrate on every movement you do. And when you start playing with cell phones, it's enough of a distraction where you cut the mind-muscle connection off and your progress can go down 50% or more. But even worse for an older man is when you're doing when you're resting that long with the stupid cell phone, what you're doing is, if you keep a good pace going, like me, I go to the gym at night. For some reason, Gold's Gym never went back to the normal hours. After, they still close earlier than they used to. And I, for some reason, cannot get to the gym before certain times. Things always come up. So I only have like an hour and a half to train, with everything, with the muscle, with aerobics, everything. Right. So I literally train like a speed demon. I rest like 15 seconds between each set. Wow. So one day I wore my heart monitor just to see what my heart rate was going up, what was going to, and it was going to like 120 beats a minute. I was actually getting a kind of semi-cardiovascular workout. So my point being is, I'm not saying that older men, I think it's very important for older men to do some sort of aerobic exercise for a number of reasons, especially related to cardiovascular health. But an older man who keeps a good pace going when he's training will get some actual cardiovascular benefit in addition to the strength and muscle size benefit. There is one drawback, however. When you rest as short as I do, unfortunately, you don't get as much muscle gains because to get the full benefit as far as strength and muscle gains, what the research shows is you have to rest a minimal 2 minutes between each set. For the very heavy exercises, believe it or not, 3 to 4 minutes between each set.
No, that's what I do. Because I'm trained mainly for strength, so I usually take 3 to 4 minutes, especially deadlifts,
Right,
the compound heavy movements.
right.
3 to 4 minutes for sure.
Well, that's what the research shows. It shows that if you want to gain strength, you really have to, and there's a reason for it. We're all familiar with creatine, the famous supplement. Well, your body, it's in your muscles too. Of course, that's why you take creatine.
Right.
But when you work out, it actually takes about at least minimal 2 to 3 minutes for the body to regenerate both creatine phosphate and secondarily, or primarily actually, ATP, the main energy source in muscle. In other words, it regenerates that, but it takes about 2 to 3 minutes. So if you do what I do, 15 seconds, you're not giving a chance for the muscle to recover its full energy status. So what you're doing is you're sacrificing the ability to train with more intensity and more muscle and get stronger. So as a consequence, I will be the first to admit, I try and stay in shape, but I don't make many muscle gains, and I'm not getting stronger at all. But I know the reason why, because I train, but I have no choice. If I go slower, I have to cut out. Sometimes I have to cut an entire body part. I can't even finish. I admit sometimes I will rest as long as a minute, but never more than that. But a minute's not enough if you really want to make maximal gains. So
now, are you going pretty often, or are your workouts infrequent right now?
I wonder about that myself, because I'm at the age where I'm learning the way I train as far as frequency might be too much for me. I've been for many years. I've been on a 3-on 1-off system where I train each muscle twice a week. I'll train 3 days on, and again, like the fourth day I take off, and every other weekend I take the whole 2 days off the weekend. I alternate it every other weekend. I'm not having any problems with injuries or anything like that, but as I said, I don't make any gains, to be honest with you. I haven't made any muscle gains. What I've done to make it brief is I've arrested muscular atrophy. In other words, I'm not getting any smaller muscle-wise. I'm maintaining what I have, but the strength is horrible, because I used to get strong all the time. I'm not gaining any strength at all, but I am maintaining the strength I have, which is a good thing. I'm not getting weaker. That's the point.
Well, I think maintaining is diminished. It's something that is important, and also something that is actually beneficial. So what I mean by that is, like, look, if I'm 25 and I can do 12 pull-ups, and then I'm 45 and I can still do 12 pull-ups, someone may say, wow, you haven't made any progress. You're still at 12 pull-ups. But the fact that you're 20 years later, you can still do 12 pull-ups, that's actually a sign of high level benefit. To me, that's progress, because the fact that you've gotten 20 years older, but you can still perform at the same level as you did when you were 25, that is a sign of progress.
Yeah. See, what I'm hoping to do, and this again applies to all men over 40, is with the resistance training, you're trying to do two things. Well, you're trying to maintain muscle, obviously, but from let's say a molecular or physiological point of view, you're trying to keep those satellite cells I mentioned earlier, stem cells. Again, it's a use it or lose it thing. If you don't do anything to stimulate them, they kind of disappear.
Right.
And when that happens, you're in trouble, because those are your main muscle repair and growth cells. They're literally muscle stem cells. So you're trying to maintain your satellite cells as much as possible. And the good news is they first showed in animal studies and then human studies, no matter how old you are, if you continue resistance exercise, and again, you don't have to work out 5 hours or anything. Just minimal stuff, you can maintain you will lose satellite cells with age. It's inevitable. There is going to be a way around that I'll talk about in a second, but if you don't, you will lose some, even with the weight training. That's why all of us can't look at 70 like we did at 30. That's one of the reasons. The second thing is what they call motor neurons. These are the neurons from the central nerve that literally innervate the muscle and allow the muscle to contract. As you get older, if you don't stimulate those motor neurons, they literally shrivel up, just like the stem cells. When that happens, the muscle disappears. It literally disappears. That turns into what they call medically sarcopenia, which is a loss of muscle with age. The good news is recent studies found that in sarcopenia, as you probably know, the old saying, the legs go first. Usually you lose muscle low. It's true. Sarcopenia always hits the lower body. It hits the extremities first. Starts with the calves, goes to the thighs, starts in the forearms, goes up to the arms, and into the central part. That's how sarcopenia works. But what they found is that with consistent training, you can limit motor neuron loss by as much as 40% or more. That means that you can keep them. You might not, again, you can always have some motor neuron loss with age, but you'll keep enough where you can maintain some muscle and some strength, but you're not going to, again, because of the inevitable loss, you're not going to be able to. This is why a lot of guys say to me, if I start working at 50, can I look like a 25-year-old? No, because of these inevitable changes with age, but you can still look very good, much better than the average man your age, and you can have that muscle and strength that's going to actually make you live years longer. Now, things are going to change in the future because of gene therapy. For example, when you, just to give you one example, when you use a adenovirus vector, I don't want to get into too much, but when you are able to inject genes for insulin-like growth factor 1, this is shown in animal studies, into aged animals, these are like rodents equivalent to humans that are maybe 75 years old, right? It reverts their muscle, let's say, situation, whatever you want to call it, where they get reverts back to like teenage years, where literally these, if they were humans, it would be like taking a 75-year-old and changing him where he could get the physique of a 35-year-old.
Wow.
It's crazy. I know it sounds crazy, but
yeah.
When they first reported this, the researchers who were doing the research were inundated from athletes and coaches all over the country that wanted to be used as guinea pigs, human guinea pigs, for their older athletes. But this is but among other things, IGF-1, getting back to this, IGF-1 regenerates satellite cells, and that's the key. See, by having
what if you just took IGF-1 now? Growth hormone or anything else that increases IGF-1?
It would definitely help it would probably at least maintain the satellite cells. I think it would probably prevent it from. You probably cut down let's say the usual loss of satellite cells with age. It would probably cut it down by a great extent. But I'm just guessing on that. But I know that IGF-1 in the muscle, not the systemic one produced in the liver from growth hormone, but the one that's produced directly in the muscle, directly works by maintaining, promoting the differentiation of and the maintenance of existing muscle satellites, and it can actually help form new ones. That's really interesting. I mean, that's really something.
There are peptides out now, which I've played around with. I don't know how much you know about peptides like CGC 1295, ipramorelin. There's tesamorelin.
Right.
I used the CGC combo last year. Yeah, it was last year. And I tell you what, I mean, without changing my diet at all, that stuff really helped me lean out. It just obliterated stomach fat. I didn't have a lot of stomach fat to start with, but I just noticed after a while I had way more of a V taper shape. Workout recovery was really good. And this stuff ramps up your own production. So it's not a replacement as growth hormone.
Right. Well, you know what that stuff is? That stuff is actually, growth hormone has the reputation of helping you to lose body fat, that we've heard that for years. And to a certain extent, that's true. But what they found is there a certain fraction of the growth hormone structure that does that. And that's what that stuff is that you took. That's the fraction of growth hormone that promotes fat oxidation. So what you experienced was a real effect. It was a real effect. Now, the problem, I just want to say, you might be wondering, in other words, it would seem like after what I said, it would be a good idea for most older men to maybe start injecting themselves with IGF-1 to maintain it's not a good idea, and for two reasons. The first reason is that for some particular reason, there's a lot of underground steroid and, growth factors sold online. For some reason, I don't know why, this I can't explain, IGF-1 is almost always fake. It's usually either an anabolic steroid or something else. So, and most doctors will not give you IGF-1 no matter what you say. So the first part, it's difficult to get. The second, and this is the bad part about IGF-1, is tumors produce IGF-1 to stay alive and to spread. Now, they produce it, and some researchers think that if you take exogenous or an outside source of IGF-1, if you have, let's say, a benign tumor or a tumor that hasn't been activated in your body, there's a chance that the IGF-1 might turn that, let's say, inactive tumor into an active tumor. So, I mean, they don't have proof of this yet, but it's a theory.
Right.
And that's, that's full-blown cancer.
Oh, yeah.
So if you take, let's say, IGF-1 regularly, let's say you're an older man and you listen to what I just said, and well, I'm going to try that IGF-1, and maybe let's say you can get the real stuff, and you inject it to maintain those satellite cells, which will maintain muscle, it really will. But there's an outside chance you could, and this is the problem with the IGF-1 gene, as a matter of fact, because in animals, some of the animals did get cancer. So it's not, that's why you don't hear about them doing it yet. It has to be perfected. You know what I mean? So this is why you can't really mess around, but IGF-1 really does definitely stimulate stem cells, satellite cells. It's the most potent stimulus of all. And the second,
peptide/hormone oxytocin.
Yeah,
there's some data that increases satellite stem cells as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it also makes
sure if there's any negatives taking that I'm aware of.
I'm not sure about the negative effects, but I know that's the hormone that makes people nice.
Oh yeah, the bonding hormone, the love hormone.
Yeah. When a woman breastfeeds, immediately there's a surge of oxytocin, which causes her to bond to the baby.
Right.
And of course, as an adult, it does a couple of other things.
Yeah.
But they did find that's true, that it's also involved in satellite cell maintenance. It's true. Yeah.
It was on Superhuman Radio. Carl Lenore talked about how Trendalone, right, the anabolic, increases oxytocin levels 50 times by 50 times. And maybe that's one of the reasons why that's such a potent anabolic.
I've never seen any research about that, about increasing oxytocin to that extent. But I can tell you this much: Trendalone to me is a kind of a dangerous steroid to be using, because first
I wouldn't use any steroid. I definitely wouldn't use that.
That to me, if you were to say to me, what is the single worst anabolic steroid that's used today, I would tell you Trendalone unhesitatingly, for a number of reasons. First of all, there's no legitimate pharmaceutical company in the world that makes Trendalone. It used to be called Parabolin years ago.
Oh, okay.
No company that makes it. It's all underground lab stuff. And the problem with underground lab stuff is there's no quality control. I'm not saying it's all junk or it's fake, but it's a crapshoot. You might be getting a pure drug that's good, or you might be getting something that's tainted. There was a young guy in Australia sent away from Trendalone through an underground pharmacy. I don't know how, but arsenic was in the drug, and the man died. He was 30 years old. He died of arsenic poisoning. It was from a Trendalone injection. Secondarily, and from my perspective, one of the things that scares me, besides, as yourself, I worry about being frail and not being able to move when I get older. But I'm equally afraid of is dementia, losing my brain.
Yeah.
And animal studies show Trendalone is very potent at stimulating the two proteins, beta amyloid and tau, that are known to be the cornerstone of Alzheimer's disease. I mean, very potent. The animals got like raging Alzheimer's disease after a couple of, I don't know how long they took they were given Trendalone. I don't know how long it took, but they got this was like several studies. They can't do this in humans, obviously, because they had to open up the brains of the rodents. They're not going to do that in humans. But the mere fact that animal studies show a relationship between Trendalone and dementia, no way. I mean, these guys that are using Trendalone now, I know they might say, well, we don't stay on it all the time. We get off it, we cycle it. But if they keep taking it year after year, what's going to happen when they start to hit like 45, 50? Are they going to start getting the memory impairments and then just slip into dementia? Because they are causing damage, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I guess not really directly comparable. It's like a person who doesn't get enough sleep. They found that a person who goes on, let's say, you hear a lot of people, I only sleep 4 or 5 hours, I'm doing fine. You think you are, but you're not. Because what the studies show, if you get, let's say, 4 or 5 hours sleep, remember those proteins I just mentioned, beta amyloid and tau, they increase tremendously in your brain. You might not feel it right away, but you're causing brain damage without enough sleep. It will catch up with you. It will. No human being. Well, let me amend that. There's certain genetic freaks that can actually go on 4 or 5 hours with no problem, but they're rare. Most people need at least 7 hours of sleep a night. If they don't get it, they're going to cause a lot of problems.
Plus, most people you see who say they only sleep 4 or 5 hours a night, you can tell looking at them that they're only sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night. They look way older than they are.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing will put you in a faster, rapidly aging state than poor sleep.
Absolutely.
Long run.
If you want to look at it, I mean, Trump always says he gets, 4 hours sleep or something like that. And you look how he kind of forgets words. He stumbles on words. And I'm not making fun of him, but that's one of the signs of poor sleep. You get these memory impairments and where you can't even pronounce words. And it looks like dementia.
Right.
But it's not. Well, it is in a way. It's early, if you want to call it early. It means you're damaging your brain. So,
well, I mean, Biden's sleep is off too, then, because
Biden has. See, the thing is, he had a bad stuttering problem when he was younger. So sometimes when he talks, because it falls on his own words, and people think that he's demented. I don't really think he has dementia. He probably has what they call minimum cognitive impairment, which a lot of older people get. Another expression for it is senior moments.
Right.
You'll be talking. Let's say I'm talking to you. And then suddenly I go, oh, what the hell was I just going to say? That's a senior. And I'll be honest with you, I get them myself.
Oh, yeah.
I get them. And you know what I noticed, Mike? Just to underscore what you just said, if I don't get enough sleep, it's really bad.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'll watch a movie, right? And like I watch the movie, and then 2 hours later, I try to remember the title of the movie I just watched. I can't remember it, and it scares me when that happens. I can't remember the title of the movie I watched 2 hours earlier. It only happens when I don't get enough sleep.
That happens to me, but only if I take a THC edible, just a movie.
Hold on a second, my thing went down. Hold on. Oh, that's screwed. Oh, anyway, go ahead. Can you see me?
I only forget the name of a movie I'm watching if I take a THC edible during the movie.
Yeah.
Did I just watch something? What did I watch?
Yeah.
Great. Going back to training, with training though, it seems that just because you can get away with certain things when you're in your 20s doesn't mean that's the best course to take. Meaning that being very meticulous about optimal technique should always be paramount.
Right.
Now you see guys in their 20s with horrendous deadlift technique. They're just bouncing. Their back is rounding so much it looks like they're about like an alien's about to come out of the upper back.
Right.
They're bouncing the bar off, no control. It's just really sloppy, and they're able to get away with that for a while. But if you keep training that way, a big time injury is coming your way. It's just a matter of time. Like that now gets into his 40s, and he said, "Oh, I used to be able to lift really heavy, but now I can't do it anymore."
Yeah.
Often it's probably because of the way they used to lift heavy.
Right.
I think I still lift heavy weights, at 48. I still lift pretty heavy. In fact, I hit a deadlift PR, a lifetime deadlift PR in 2020. When I was 46, I pulled 600 pounds. That's the most I've ever pulled.
Great.
The thing is it wasn't always this way. When I was 18, my technique was definitely sloppy in a lot of stuff. I had no training. I didn't have a professional working with me. But over time, especially as I got into the fitness business, I really became meticulous about technique. Yeah. And it's 100% foolproof. You can still get wear and tear. You can still get injured, but you're way less likely to get injured. And if you're way less likely to get injured, you can sustain that performance over a longer period of time.
Right. I definitely agree with you. I mean, even if you can get away with it when you're young, you should, because you could be setting yourself up for future pain. Like I said earlier, when I did those exercises, I didn't know when I did heavy press behind the neck and upright rows that I was grinding my shoulder joint. Right. I didn't feel anything. Like I said, I felt no pain. I saw a lot of muscle growth. Why would I stop doing it? But I mean, again, I don't think it was known at all at that time how bad those exercises were. Everybody did them. But the point is, what you do when you're young you're setting yourself up for future pain if you're not careful. There's no question about it. No question.
Oh, no doubt about it. Now, talking about the higher repetitions, that's interesting. So 25 to 30 reps per set with about 40% of your estimated 1 rep max.
Right.
That would be an interesting, I think, because I like lifting heavy weights, I wouldn't want to completely just do that. Yeah. But I think with let's say I do 5 workouts per week, I could have Monday fairly heavy in that 6 to 8 rep range, or maybe 8 to 10. And then Tuesday, the next day you come in, you do some other stuff, and then you go into that higher rep range. So they almost become not just active recovery workouts, because you can actually build muscle training like that, but psychologically, it's not as daunting a task.
Yeah.
One really heavy workout, and you're thinking, man, I have to do that again tomorrow.
Right.
Now you're thinking, hey, okay, I just completed a really heavy workout. Tomorrow it's going to be a little bit more loose. I'm just going to do higher repetitions with different moves, focus on technique. So it's not as much of a daunting task now. And then after that, you can do another heavy training session later in the week.
Well, they have something called undulating periodization.
Right, right.
Where, I did a system like that. As a matter of fact, it's a pretty good system where one workout, I would do really heavy weights as much as I could, maybe I never did less than 6 reps, about, 6 reps. Then the next workout, I would use moderate weight and do 8 to 12 reps,
right.
Basically the same exercises. And the third workout, I didn't do the thing where you use very light weight and go to failure, you know what I mean? But I did enough of a light weight where I would get maybe 15 reps per set, close to failure, And I'd alternate like that all through the workouts. And, it worked good. I mean, it worked good. And as you said, it took pressure off me of having to think that I had to do a very extremely heavy workout every time, because at my age, I couldn't do it anyway, but I'm saying that it does take a toll on your mind to try and train very heavy workout. It takes a physical and mental toll. Most people can't keep up with it, I mean, that's in fact, that's the whole basis of this periodization system, is to allow periods where let's say 3 months heavy, 3 months not,
Right.
The whole basis was to make it refreshing so you don't burn out mentally, and also to take stress off your muscles so you don't get injuries, which would occur if you did. I mean, you look at the guys like that train heavy all the time, like the guys, for example, 2 examples come to mind: Dorian Yates, Mike Mentzer. These 2 guys, they were into that same high intensity system that I talked about.
Training.
And it's a great system for for size and strength, it really is. But what happened to them? They both had to end their careers. Mike Mentzer told me, this is off the record. He told me that I said, he got out of shape, and I said to him, Mike, do you ever think of like getting back in shape, and this and that? I mean, not necessarily for competition. You know what he told me? He says, I would, but he says, I have so many injuries that I'm in pain all over my body. And he says he can't do it. I asked Dorian Yates why he retired. He won the Olympia 6 times. He said he had injuries. He had injuries to his, I think it was his lat, his bicep, his thigh, hamstring. He says he felt he couldn't train at 100% effort. And if he can't train at 100%, he didn't want to compete. He wasn't afraid of his competitors, Ronnie Coleman, any of those guys. He just felt if he couldn't come in at 100%, he was done, and he retired. So this is the price you pay for what, training. These guys never went high. They trained heavy every workout. Yeah, they did they only trained infrequently. They didn't train for a long time. The volume was low, but it was heavy all the time. You can't do it.
Yeah, no, it's just a matter of time you're going to get derailed. The problem is that when you go through those periods where everything feels light, right? That's the most fun working out, where you just go in there and everything feels light. Heavy weights, things that are normally heavy, they're just flying off the ground.
Right.
In my head, I start thinking, okay, maybe this is the way it's going to be indefinitely. And then you start calculating where you can get, but it never lasts. So you always say, look, when you're in that zone where all your workouts, or you're just flying through your workouts, you feel really strong. It may go on for a couple of weeks, it may even go on for a month, but eventually it's going to slow down.
That's true.
You just have to enjoy it while it lasts. When those periods come along, you go, okay, cool, I'm going to enjoy this while it lasts, because it's like the stock market. It's going to go up and down.
That's it.
I'm going to just have this linear progression indefinitely.
That's exactly right. That's the way it works. So, but getting back to the aging thing, you have to modify your workouts. When you're younger, you can get away with greater frequency, greater volume, the number of sets you do, and this and that, and you have to modify it. I would say that the age to start doing this would be about 40.
Okay.
About 40. And
let's talk about that, because when you're in your 20s, you're competing in bodybuilding, so you're obviously performing at a very high level. What did you notice as you got into your 40s?
Well, I noticed that the gains started coming a little slower. There was a time when I could put like an inch on my thigh in 2 weeks just by doing squats in a different with more weight or high intensity. As
Right.
as I hit 40, the gains started coming slower.
Yeah.
But I still was very strong at 40, and I didn't have any injuries. I didn't have any pains in my body.
Did you find that you had to train less frequency? You had to have more days off?
Actually, at 40, I didn't. I just trained the same frequency. I trained the same volume.
Yeah.
But the real turning point, as I said earlier, came when I was 55.
Okay.
That's when I noticed that I started to get pains in my shoulder and my knees, and I was diagnosed with arthritis. And I had to cut the weights down a lot. I had to, like today, my thigh workout is the weights I use are less than what I used to use as a warm up years ago.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I do higher reps, and as a strange effect, it's kind of funny though. But I actually have more vascularity in my thighs than when I competed in When I competed in bodybuilding,
Okay. Interesting.
I had low body fat, but I wasn't very vascular like some of the guys. I didn't have veins all over my body.
Right.
Now I have veins in my legs. I never had them when I competed. It's the strangest thing. And I'm thinking maybe it's because I do higher reps in my legs all the time. I really, of course, a lot of it has to do with subcutaneous fat. I probably have less fat in my legs, but
Yeah.
my legs are a lot. The size difference is insane. I mean, I'm embarrassed. If I wear shorts and walk by where I can see a reflection, I get depressed. It looks like I have bird legs. I mean, they're cut. My legs, they're fairly cut, my thighs, but they're so freaking small. I mean, there's women in the gym that have bigger thighs than me, for crying out loud, Yeah. But, listen, as long as I can walk and have some strength, I mean, there's weird things happen. Like about 3 weeks ago, I was doing my normal calf workout,
Yeah.
and I didn't increase the weight. I didn't do anything. I was doing 3 exercises for calves. I start out with a donkey calf machine, then I go to a seated calf, and then I finish with a leg press calf. I do about 4 or 5 sets. I do more sets to my calves than practically any body part because they've always been weak,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Those are hard to build.
yeah. So, I did my donkey calves, no problem. I go to my second exercise, which was the seated calves, and I put on the same weight I had, the last workout, the workout before, didn't increase the weight. As soon as I picked up my toes, I felt this ripping sensation. It felt like my calves were being ripped off from the bone. The pain was so great that I yelled. Ah! I went like that, and people looked at me. And I said, "What did I do? Did I just destroy what did I do? Did I just tear my calves in half? What?" And sure enough, I couldn't walk. I was shuffling the rest of the work. I was literally shuffling. I couldn't pick my feet up, and it made me realize how important the calves are because I couldn't walk. I had to like slide my feet. I couldn't lift my feet up, and what happened was I checked. There was no swelling. There was no black and blue. There was no indication of a muscle tear, and I still have a little bit of it. I haven't trained my calves since then. So what my self-diagnosis, I think I suffered a severe strain. But here's the key: why? That's what I can't figure out. I was warmed up. I didn't increase the weight. Why would it happen on the first rep? I tear my calves like that. I still don't know. A complete mystery. Usually I can figure things out. This one has me mystified.
Yeah.
There's
a lot of comedians that make jokes about injuries you get as you get older. Like Cat Williams one time said he blew out a rib. Like, man, what happened? What'd you do? He goes, well, I sneezed.
Right. Well, the reason I relate this story is because I think a lot of it has to do with my age.
Yeah.
I don't think this would have happened when I was 40 or 55.
Right.
I think that I do stretch my calves a lot. When I always emphasize the stretch, because you see a lot of people do those little tiny calf right then,
Yeah.
So I try and do full movements, and I always emphasize the stretch at the bottom.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that maybe there's just a little bit less flexibility in the muscle, and just happened to get a bad timing thing where, even though I was warmed up, I just severely strained the muscle.
Right.
I think it's totally related. I think it has a lot to do with my age. I don't think it would have happened 10 years ago. It never happened. I never had this injury in my life. I never felt it was horrible pain. Oh my God, it was terrible.
Well, I think one thing that goes way down as you get older is your recovery abilities, restoration.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to really balance. That becomes a lot more important to balance the equation. Because when I was in college, you go out on a bender, the next morning you wake up, you have a great workout, hungover. I never got massages or did anything for restoration.
Yeah.
But I remember reading about the benefits of massages in, I think it was Muscle and Fitness. No, not Muscle and Fitness. It was Muscle Media 2000 before it became Muscle Media.
Right.
Anyway, there was this whole article about the benefits of massage.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm a broke college student. I can't afford that. But I made a mental note of it. I go, sometime down the road, I'm going to want to try, what if I got a massage once a week? At the end of a training week. So for example, let's say Friday is the last training day of the week. So I get a massage after that workout and then I rest up on the weekend, come back Monday. And I'm telling you, I started doing that in 2014 and I haven't stopped since then.
Really?
Now, I always get it once a week. For a while, I was getting it once a week for many months. It might have been years. Now it's more, I mean, frankly, I should do it. I should start doing it once a week again. The reason why I don't do it that often is because the lady I go to, it's painful. This is not some relaxation massage at a resort somewhere. I mean, she gets in there and breaks up all that inflammation. So I have to psychologically rest myself. I was like, I don't know if I want to deal with that today. But I tell you, you feel great as you get out of there, especially if your back is really stiff from deadlifts or your hamstrings are really sore from all the moves you do. Just having someone in, because basically you're creating all this inflammation and you have someone get in there and just break all that up. Now it's not going to accumulate as much as it normally would, because otherwise you make a bunch of inflammation one week and then you go into the next week with that inflammation. Now you're creating even more, and then it just keeps compounding until you get an injury. Yeah. So if you can get a really good massage therapist to work on your body once a week into the training week, I think it pays big dividends, especially if you do this in the long run.
Well, that reminds me of a tip I'd also suggest for older men and women who are involved in working out. If you do a workout, let's say, and you are unusually sore or you don't feel fully recovered, don't force yourself to go in the gym thinking that you're going to lose something.
Right.
You'd actually be better off to skip the workout and maybe come back next time. And the thing to keep in mind, you're not going to lose any muscle. You're not going to lose any strength, but you will give your body a little bit more chance to recover. And this is something that you need to do, especially when you get older. Your body, it's not going to recover as rapidly. You're going to get those days where the muscle just feels dead after the workout. Yeah. And by the time let's say the legs, by the time you train your next leg workout comes up, they're still going to be sore. They're still going to be hurting. When you go in, you're not going to really get any benefit.
Right.
But you still have too much inflammation, as you said, in the muscle.
Well, sometimes people can be really pedantic to those training schedules. They go, no, I have a schedule. And I respect that, because I understand you have to be disciplined to do this. If you always over fixate on how you feel, then you may never work out. You may, I don't know if I should work out today. Well, because you're not always going to feel super enthusiastic about training. Yeah. I've had days where I don't feel like training at all, and I go, just go do it. And then I get some of the best workouts ever. And then I've had times where my body says, look, you should skip today. And I go do it anyway. And I realize I should have skipped that day. So it's, you don't always know. But one problem I think a lot of people have is what makes people that love training a lot different than people who don't love training is that we actually enjoy the stimulus of working out. We crave that. The way someone likes to go drinking on Friday night, our little fix is we go work out. Because you always feel better after a workout. You just feel invigorated. Yeah. Now, that's a great thing. But the problem with that is you can become what I call a stimulus addict. We're now addicted to the stimulus of training, regardless of whether you're making progression or not. Which is why I really feel that keeping track of strength progressions is really important, because it gives, otherwise you just have the illusion of progress. So you go, hey, I work out 6 days a week. I never miss a workout. Sometimes you hear people say, I haven't missed a workout in 10 years. I go, well, you probably should miss several workouts, because you're better off if you did. People often ask me, they go, what do you do when you go on vacation? I go, well, look, a vacation is usually going to be a week at the most. I don't work out at all. I don't have to go to the hotel gym or anything. I'll go be active. I'll go hiking. I'll go swimming or something, but go exploring. But I'm not so addicted to training that like, well, let me pack some bands in my suitcase and I'll put a little workout in. No, take the week off. You'll come back refreshed. You'll be stronger. You'll get used to the vacation's not just a vacation from your life, from your work life, but also from your lifestyle. So you get a break going into that. But I know people that are just addicted to working out, and they don't keep track of any kind of progression. They're just going through the motions.
That's true. Well, I remember when I used to write for the magazines, they would send me to, all over the world to cover these bodybuilding contests. A lot of times, we'd go in a crew, writers, photographers. I mean, I remember when we arrived in Paris one year, as soon as we got in the hotel, everybody was saying, "Oh, we got to go to the gym." They just took a cross country flight and
Right.
they're running to the gym, and I'm thinking, are you freaking crazy? When I went on the trips, I very rarely worked out at all. I said to myself, I'm going to just take this, like you said, like a little mini vacation. Why would I run to the gym? I train all the time back there. Why am I going to knock myself out? I just relaxed, so maybe I gained a little weight from eating or something. So what? I'll burn it off when I get back. But, getting back to also what you said about not, not feeling like you want to work out. It sounds funny, but if you said to me, how often do you actually feel like you really like you're gung ho and want to work out? I would say about twice a month. So in other words, my point being, you have to be objective. If
Yeah.
I went by entirely how I feel, I would hardly work out at all. But even on the days I don't feel like working out, within about 20 minutes of working out, your energy systems kick in, you get warmed up, and you're into it. There's no problem.
Right.
Sometimes you have to fight your own self, in other words, where your brain is telling you, skip the gym today, screw it, watch a movie, you don't need to go. You got to fight that and go. And I do this almost every time I go to the gym because as I say, I always run late. And there's a part of my brain say, hey, it's too late. You're not going to finish the workout anyway, skip it. I say, nope, I'm going to go to the gym and do whatever I can. And
Right.
I do it. I almost never skip the workout under those situations.
The problem with skipping workouts too is 1 week can become 2 weeks, and now 2 weeks becomes 4 weeks. And as I remember I took 3 months off from training when I was younger. Just during the summer, I was traveling a lot, so I just didn't work out. And I was shocked how much weaker I was when I finally got back in the gym. I came back really fast in about 4 or 5 weeks. So that's the difference. Now that's me at 21 or something. Now fast forward now at 48, if I took 3 months off from training, I can't even imagine how weak I would be. That would be depressing.
Yeah.
My whole body would just crack, just grab a light dumbbell. I've taken 3 months off. So where I'm going is it becomes way more important to be consistent, get older. You can't get away with that. You can't take 6 months off and then just jump back in. It's gonna.
Well, you also raise an important point there. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm getting a little bit of echo. Anyway, I noticed something that kind of made me think about something in relation to training with age. When the gyms closed, because of the COVID thing, I didn't work out for 3.5 weeks. And I said, nothing. Completely sedentary. Nothing. I didn't even, I tried to do push-ups, I admit it. But my shoulder, I actually went down. It's kind of funny. I went down, and literally had a roll. I couldn't do a single push-up. It's embarrassing. I used to be able to do 100 at a pop. I couldn't do a single because my shoulder was killing me. It felt like a knife going through my shoulder. So I just said, "Oh, screw it. What am I going to do?" But I said to myself, "Oh, but I'll find some way to work out or do something. I'm not going to lose anything." I was shocked in just 3 weeks of how much muscle atrophy I had. It's just 3 weeks.
Wow.
My arms looked like they shrunk about 2 inches. My calves disappeared. I was shrinking by the day, and it made me realize that when you're older, you have to be consistent. You lose muscle incredibly fast. This is something that I think this is for the really older guy. I'm not talking about a guy 40 or 50. I'm talking 65 and up. If you're working out and you're 65 or older, you got to work out, even missing 1 or 2 not 1 or 2, but if you miss, let's say 2 weeks, you're going to see a difference in strength and muscle. You will see it happen. I think it must be related to those satellite cells.
Right.
They have to be constantly stimulated or they disappear real fast, not in younger people, but in older people. I didn't realize this till that 3-week period that I took off. I wouldn't have imagined I'd lost that much muscle in 3 weeks. But when I started working out, I have to admit it came back pretty fast, but I was shocked,
Yeah, I think that's where people find really getting into training a daunting task because you work you work out really hard for a couple of months, you make a lot of progress, and then you lose it so fast.
Right.
So let's say you work out really hard for 6 months, you make incredible progress, and then what if for whatever reason you can't train for a month,
Right.
and you so much, or let's say you can't train for 6 months. It's almost like you're starting all over again. Now there is muscle memory, and you're going to get things back a lot faster than previously, to a point, as you said, as you alluded to, as you get to a certain age, it becomes harder and harder to get that rebound effect.
That's right. Well, I know it sounds funny. I wrote an article in my applied metabolic systems. I think the weightless workout, something like that, or the no weight workout, something like that. I can't remember the title, but basically, I talked about a really old system. It goes back to Charles Atlas, dynamic tension, where you basically kind of use your own body as resistance. Like let's say you'd want to do a curl, you kind of do it like this. You use, you curl like that.
Yeah.
Think that does nothing, but believe it or not, a lot of the muscle size is dependent on what they call electrophysiological stimulation. In other words, you got to send nerve impulses to the muscle, and just simulating resistant exercise. I don't think I wrote in the article. You're not going to gain you can't gain muscle size from it, but you can surprisingly maintain muscle if you do that. You can actually maintain a lot of muscle with no equipment at all if you do that. I mean, if worse comes to worse, where you can't work out for a month or you have no access to any equipment, you will actually maintain a large degree of muscle. Not going to make gains, but you can maintain. You can doing that. The muscle just needs that stimulation. It doesn't care where it comes from. It's got to have some stimulation. That's the way it works.
It's why it's good also to have some kind of home gym set up. It doesn't have to be extravagant.
Yeah.
In an apartment, for example, so you don't have all the space in the world in Los Angeles. During the pandemic out here, we have a nice home gym in the garage. I mean, it's not extravagant, but it's a trap bar, a barbell. I can do deadlifts. I can do trap bar deadlifts. I've got kettlebells, so I can do upper body moves with that. It's enough to.
Yeah.
It's more than enough to maintain, and it's enough to actually get stronger. So it was funny. So I didn't notice that drop off that a lot of people did who didn't have access to the gym and then didn't have access to any equipment. And then for people that are really busy, sometimes I have this 15-minute rule, right? Where if you're trying to do something regularly, which requires going somewhere, if it takes longer than 15 minutes to get there, your chances of skipping it start going up. So in other words, if the gym you go to is an hour away, you're going to be thinking about that. Like, man, I got to drive an hour out there, then I'm going to be driving an hour back.
Right.
You're way more likely to skip it. Now, if it's 5 minutes away, like, look, I'll be there in 5 minutes. You're way more likely to go.
Right.
So the 15 minutes. I mean, there's things that in Vegas or on the other side of town, such as not hyperbaric chamber, but float chambers, for example. I was playing around with that. But the place I used to go to, it was at least half hour, 45 minutes away. Right. And there's a way I was going to make it. I mean, I did it a couple of times and I thought it was interesting. I probably would have kept going, but it was just too much of a hassle to keep going regularly, especially if you want to go more than once a week.
Right. That's true. No, that's definitely true. People, the easier it is to get to the place, the more likely somebody will do it, will actually go there. I mean, when I did that high intensity system years ago, I was using, for a while, I found a place that had the Nautilus machines. So they weren't that prevalent at that time, but there was a place literally 55 miles away from where I lived, a little gym that had the full line of machines. So me and my training partner used to drive down there 3 times a week, 55 miles each way to work out for 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think back on that, I said, gee, I must have really been motivated.
Yeah.
Because today I wouldn't even think about doing something like that. I must have been so motivated because to me it seems insane when I look back on it now, driving 55 miles each way to do a half-hour workout.
There's people that commute hours each way. For work. They just grind it out. And work is a necessity. You have to be able to pay your bills. But that's a lot of dedication to put in that kind of effort.
Yeah, I was telling somebody the other day, here in LA, the traffic is terrible during the day, no matter where you are. Yeah, it's awful. Forget the freeways, and even the streets are bumper to bumper.
Oh yeah, I remember.
I was on the freeway about a week ago. Again, middle of the day, bumper to bumper traffic. And I was thinking to myself, my God, could I do this day after day? Like people get up and sit in traffic, every single day, work day. I'd go crazy. That's what made me appreciate I mean, people now it's in vogue to work out of your home because of the COVID thing. A lot of people went in offices now they're working out of home.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for 45 years,
Yeah.
and I didn't really appreciate it until now when I started to see all this traffic. I said I avoid all that crap. It makes me think that how lucky I am to be able to do this. To work out. I couldn't. Having to sit in traffic, I burn out in a week. I'll tell you, I couldn't take
Just imagine if you're a writer, that's your vocation, which you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Let's say that. So you wake up and then you go to your office and you start working. So just right down the hall from your bedroom.
Right.
Yeah, I wake up, come down the stairs, get my morning shake, get to work.
Yeah.
Now contrast that with, let's say someone's a writer, but he decides he's gonna write in an office.
Oh, yeah.
So he's in a car and drives. Let's say the office is an hour away.
Right.
I mean, just think about how much time you're wasting where you could have actually been working.
That's
You've
right.
actually been writing. And the time it gets to set up and then go to this office, then you got to go in there and get set up, and then you finally start writing. If you were just writing at home, you probably would have gotten in an hour of writing already by the time.
Well, Joe Weider, years ago, he offered me he wanted to make me the editor-in-chief of Muscle and Fitness magazine, which was the biggest magazine, bodybuilding magazine at the time. And I thought about it, and I turned him down because it was 40-mile drive from where I lived.
Yeah.
And and it was on the 405 freeway, the worst freeway in LA as far as traffic.
Oh yeah.
And I said, Joe, realistically, I don't think I could handle this. I had a brand new car at the time and everything. I said I couldn't handle it. I remember he said, I understand, Jerry, you're a free spirit. That's what he called me. He says a free spirit. So I actually turned down the editor. I probably would have made a little more money, but I think I would have burned out. I couldn't take it. I didn't like the idea of being stuck in an office anyway. So I guess I am a free spirit in that extent.
Yeah.
I don't like that. It's just never appealed. I've done that kind of work where I have been in office. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
It's not my personal.
Definitely not for me. And if it's a good fit for someone else, then I have all the respect to that person.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Figure out what works for you. Some people are. I have respect for anyone that works any job.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of will, to go. Especially like people who go to jobs every day that they hate.
Oh my God, I've done that.
I couldn't sustain that, but some people, they go, look, this is what I have to do. So I'm just going to grind it out. And I definitely respect that dedication to that grind, but I couldn't live that way myself. No.
I remember as a kid, I got a job working in the post office. No disrespect to postal workers, but I that job, first I worked as a clerk where I literally had to put letters in boxes, P.O. box. And then I couldn't take it. I had to get up at 3:00 in the morning to get there. It was the same thing day after day.
Yeah.
It was so boring that it's the only time in my life that I fell asleep standing up. I leaned against the bar, and the supervisor came up to me, yelled, "What are you doing?" And he says, "You sleep?" I said, "Yeah, sorry." It was like 4:00 in the morning, man. I was.
Yeah.
So then I switched to becoming a carrier. I figured, hey, I'm going to be outdoors. I'm, delivering. It should be fun. Same freaking routine day after day. So freaking boring. Horrible. I never saw anybody. I drive this little truck. It was horrible. And I remember writing to my mother. I said, Mom, if this is going to be my future, I am going to kill myself. That's how much I hated that job. And again, listen, I remember the other guys in the office, the postal workers, they loved the job. They were happy as a lark. I mean, they get their paychecks. They had their government benefits.
Right.
They were with big smiles on their face. They loved it. More power to them. In fact, at the second job, I actually got fired after they had a 90-day probationary period. Yeah. The supervisor called me in the office and he says, Jerry, you're a smart guy, but this job's not for you. It's not for everyone. And I said, you're absolutely right. It isn't for me. And we just shook hands and I left. He noticed it. It wasn't my thing. I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of guys who, they stay at that job for 30 years. They love it. Not for me. I couldn't do it. I have to have something where, see, the key is I have to be using my mind. I have to have something creative that stimulates. Otherwise, I get so freaking bored.
Right.
If it's a rote thing, where you do the same thing every day, my brain literally turns off. And I get so bored, it's excruciating. I can't take it. Some people are like that. They don't have that problem. They could just get into it automatically, do their thing, and be happy. Like I said, not me.
Well, I think there's a lesson there for training longevity as well, is play around with different things rather than just get stuck in these routines where you're doing the same things over and over again. Now, there has to be some repetitive nature to a training program to get better at it. That you can't just deadlift once every 3 months and expect to get better at it. You have to do it fairly often, but it doesn't have to be the only move you do. You don't have to do the same 2-3 moves every single time. You can switch it up a little bit. You can switch up the rep ranges. I like this whole idea of playing around with the 25 to 40 reps. Was that it?
It was 25 to 30. Yeah.
25 to 30. Okay. See, I've never done any training. I mean, I've done high repetition sets before, not usually at the end of a workout as a finisher or something like that. So just the idea of doing, let's say, 3 sets, 25 reps.
Oh man.
Into me. I've never done that before.
I'll tell you, it's a lot harder than it sounds. I thought it'd be easy.
It is.
So, like what, 40% of 1 rep maximum for 25, 30? That's easy. That's nothing.
Yeah.
Oh my God. On the second set, on the first set, it was painful, right? But I did it. I mean, on the second set, I was aiming for, I think, 25 reps. It started to hurt at 17. I mean, it was like by the time I didn't even make 25, I got to 23. On the third set, I didn't even get to 20. My muscles were dead.
Yeah.
Remember, I was training to near failure, so I was really going all out, and it was as hard as lifting heavy weights, believe it or not. Just in a different way, but it was just as hard. That surprised me.
Yeah, and I think training to near failure versus failure, that's another longevity tip right there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Paul Stotzlin always said, leave a couple of reps in the bank. That was his big thing.
Yeah.
If you can do 8 reps and the 8th rep is very difficult, you're grinding it out, stop at 6.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think that's especially for older guys.
Yeah.
And like I say, the research shows they've had 2 groups. One group went to complete total muscular failure, where they literally couldn't move the weight. The next group went to near muscular failure. They made the exact same gains. So you don't really need to go to. There's no
problem with going to failure is that, especially if you're using free weights, your technique is going to start going south. Oh, yeah. You see someone doing whatever the move is.
Yeah.
10th rep is the maximum rep. It doesn't look like the first rep or even the 5th rep. It usually looks. I mean, it's degraded so much.
Yeah.
Charles Poliquin used to say that with his clients, he wouldn't count. He wouldn't count reps unless they were completed with good technique. Was his thing. So if someone was doing, let's say, dumbbell overhead presses and the first 8 reps look great, but then reps 9 and 10 are really sloppy, grinding it out. Nope, you only did 8.
Yeah, right.
Encouraging people to end each set with good technique. And if you look at Olympic weightlifters, they never train to failure. Of course, they're focused on maximum strength.
That's right.
But they're also focused on maximum technique.
Right.
So going to failure, now you're reinforcing poor technique. I think that's the other big problem with going to failure is that you're now programming your mind that that's acceptable.
Right. Yeah, that's a problem. That's true. I think near failure is about the best you should do. There's no reason. And like I said, the studies show that if you do use heavier weights, let's say 6 rep range, something like that, heavy enough, you don't need to go to failure at all. You're getting the maximum number of muscle fibers. There's no need to go to failure if you're lifting heavy. No need. It only applies if you're using lighter weights. That's it. And again, when I should say near failure rather than total muscular failure. Yeah, that's the way it works. Yeah.
Well, this is good. I mean, this is a great discussion. We can wrap it up here. And
one other thing I'll say before, just to be complete, as far as nutrition for the older guy.
Okay.
One thing I'd suggest is to keep the protein higher, because again, you have to maintain the muscle. As men or women get older, you get this thing called anabolic resistance, which is basically cured by working out. But there's always a certain degree of it where it's a little bit harder to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, let's say when you're over 40. So you want to keep the protein about, the range usually given for muscle hypertrophy is 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. 2.2 grams per kilogram is about a gram per pound of body weight. I think that's a good amount of protein for an older man to shoot for. It'll give him enough protein to meet all his possible needs. And another thing I would do is, as you get older, try not to, I know it's hard to, easier to say to do, but try to be careful with your total calorie intake.
Right.
Because it's easier, it is easier to gain body fat. That's why you see a lot of guys they get this little, pat belly or roll. Especially if you're low in testosterone, that really adds to it. But as you get older, it's easier to gain body fat. So you don't want to go crazy on the calories. Eat enough calories to give you, your training energy, your brain energy, all this and that. But don't try and eat like you ate when you were 25. That's the point. You can't get away with it. It's not going to work.
I think the problem also, as people get way older, is they eat more, but they also are more sedentary as well.
Starts
compounding.
Yeah, that's what you get.
It did a long walk every single day, right? 10,000 steps. It's about 5 miles, 4 to 5 miles, and every single day without fail, because that's not high intensity. It's not something where you walk one day like, okay, let me take the next day off. And it does so much for your mental health as well.
Yeah.
Then you eat clean. Now, I'm not saying that that's all you should do, but if the average person did that, they'd be way better off than they are now, because some people, they don't even get 1,000 steps in.
Oh.
Hey, they don't even get 2,000.
Well, when you work out, they now know that exercise stimulates substances in the brain that maintain brain health, like brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Right. You get that from just that walking you just described. That's enough to stimulate brain. That'll keep your brain going so you don't get dementia, because brain-derived neurotrophic factor repairs neurons. So, repairs the damage so you don't slip into dementia. So that's another important reason to do this type of exercise. You have to. But there's one thing I will say is a lot of people, they'll say muscle turns to fat, but what happens is as they get older, their activity level goes less and less, but they're eating the same amount of calories. So they start putting on the muscles atrophy from not getting enough stimulation. In the meantime, the excess calories are being converted to fat. So to the naked eye, it looks like the muscles are turning into fat, but they're two complete, that's like saying turning wood into steel. They're two different substances. But there's one thing that's interesting that they just found out recently is a lot of times people blame weight gain as they get older on lower metabolism. And what they found is your metabolism doesn't get that much lower as you get older. It's more or less a myth. I know it sounds crazy, but the metabolism stays steady throughout life. But what happens is people change their habits, like we were just talking about. They might not realize that they're a lot less physically active and they're still eating too much to commensurate with the physical activity. That's why they're gaining fat. It's not the metabolism. And another myth is that fat people have lower metabolism. That's also not true. They actually have slightly higher metabolisms. They actually produce more thyroid hormone, but they're fat because they're taking in more calories than they burn. You can't get away. It's that simple, All these excuses don't really work, Yeah. They don't really work.
Well, excuses are just a form of rationalizing not changing behavior.
Right.
So why I shouldn't even bother because I have this problem. I'm just not going to have to accept things the way they are.
Right. That's true.
And that's a perilous philosophy to have.
It is.
You start making these small compromises, they turn into big compromises fairly quickly.
Yeah, and then you could wind up dead.
Yeah.
Catches up with you. Yeah. Oh, I'll cut my cigarette smoking down. I'll only have half a pack a day. Not gonna work, pal. You're still breathing in 6,000 toxic chemicals.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, hey, this was great. Everyone can check out appliedmetabolics.com. That's your newsletter. You do it every month and you deliver great content. But what I like about your newsletter is this is not a 200-page article or a 200-word article or 500 words. It's exhaustive, and then you summarize it as well. So a lot of times when I read your articles, I'll go read the summary first. Right. And if I find that interesting, then I go back and read the whole thing. So you put a lot of work into this.
I do.
Subscription fee, it's $10 a month, which is nothing for all the great content you deliver.
Yeah.
And you do it every single month without fail.
I do it every single, and also I as you know, I cover topics a lot of people don't cover. And, I try and do it really in depth. So every question would be answered. And I write in a manner that anyone can understand. I'm not trying to impress anyone with how smart I am or use a lot of technical terms. If I use technical terms, I explain them immediately so somebody doesn't have to reach for a medical dictionary or something like that. I honestly believe anybody, no matter what your education or experience, will learn something from reading every issue. I really believe that. And I can tell you because I learned something just doing the research.
Well, yeah.
And I've been doing this stuff for half a century. So if I learn something, anybody will learn something. I think people would really get a lot of benefit out of it, both for health and gain muscle gains, body fat loss. There's nothing. There's all truth in there. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not involved in any products or anything. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain by reading it.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. It's great. I've been a subscriber for many years. You put out excellent content. So again, appliedmetabolics.com. Thanks a lot, Jerry. Let me go ahead and stop recording here.